Stories are very powerful if you want to remember things and if you want to connect and relate emotionally. That's the main reason why I set up this podcast as a collection of stories from people. We learn through their stories and their life-changing moments, what shaped them, and I hope you can relate to their stories. So you can learn about what shaped you, the things in your past, the things in your childhood, the things that you lived through, the things that you've seen and heard and felt. They all shaped you. So I challenge you to think about your own experiences while listening to the stories of the people on this show. Now, today I'm going to talk to Maarten Jurriaanse. And I've met Maarten a long time ago, right at the start of when service design became a thing in Europe, right at the start of the whole movement. He's been a designer for a very long time. He's a teacher. He is a strategist. He loves complexity. And we're going to talk about what are good teachers and what are the bad teachers. And we're going to talk about leadership, obviously, and he's going to warn us about the consequences of stereotypes in leadership. We're also going to talk about faking until you make it. We're going to talk about harmony and the importance of disharmony and, in the end, pivoting. So here we go.
I always start telling people that I'm a designer, but what the hell does that actually mean? So for me, that means actually that I'm always trying to build solutions or trying to figure out how things work. Actually, that's where it starts. So it's not really about building things or creating things. Yes, that's important, but that actually is not my drive. My drive is really much more focused on being very curious to figure out how things are constructed and how and why they are constructed in the way they are. So I'm always curious to open the lid and see what's beneath it and how it's working, and can I really understand what the machinations are in there.
Where did that fascination start? Can you remember?
I was actually a little bit of a lonely player. So I would have friends over and they would ruin my play. So I would be like, well, maybe, no, well, just let me do it because I know how I want to do it. So please go away. So I was always building stuff and creating stuff. And I had something which was the most awesome. It was not Meccano, but it was more simple, because I'm not that technical. It was made of wood and it's called silomontage. So it's like a mounting kit with screws and bolts and stuff like that. And that would really, and I would actually change it because it didn't do what I wanted to do. So I would cut off pieces and ruin it probably. But so that is something that is part of me. And always drawing stuff and ships. I had this crazy fascination with shipping and big boats and stuff like that. I tried to draw it and I wasn't very good at it, but I kept going probably.
Okay. So and so you didn't have a lot of friends, I assume.
Well, I would have friends, but I would rather, keep them out of my playground, my home playground somehow, because they would ruin stuff. So I would go outside. Yeah. Avoid having them in my space.
Yeah. Friends ruin stuff. Yeah. That's pretty.
Usually they do.
Yeah, they do. But so what about your parents? Did they observe that behavior and think, oh?
Well, I'm not really sure how they thought about it. I used to join. My mother was she was a designer. Actually, she was the first graphic designer in art school here in The Hague. female designer. It was called advertising drawing or something like that. And she was the
What do you
first
mean by that?
woman.
But what do you mean she was the first? What exactly?
Well, usually there would be, so this was somewhere in the 50s or early 60s. There weren't too many female students in art school doing commercial track. So she would do graphic design, typography, and it was dominated by men. There were only men smoking pipes in the classroom, stuff like that. So she was quite early in the but later on she started drawing. So she became an artist and make a lot of drawings, and I would sit in her atelier, and I would just be there and work along with her. And I liked the smell of paint and oil paint and stuff like that. And I was always very much intimidated also by it, because my struggles in drawing exactly what I had in mind, that was usually a big problem also, because I had these fantastic constructs in my mind and I could never realize them. So that was also something. So she would see that. She would try to call me. No, it's fantastic. Don't do anything about it. No, I'm not happy with it. It's not good enough. So frustrations. I remember also a lot of times frustrated.
How old were you when this?
This something like 7, 8, 9 around that age.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So your mother, is she the inspiration for, because your studies,
Yeah, she worked together with some other graphic designers. So she did a lot of publicity for cultural institutions, and she worked together with a few designers, and especially one designer, a close friend, and they would have a studio. So I was really like, wow, that's great if you can have a living out of doing that and just being there and trying to design or create communication with whatever means necessary. I remember they made an affiche, a poster with spaghetti for, I think it was for Ligeti. My father was a musician, so they did a lot of work for musical ensembles, and they played really crazy modern music. Sorry?
Your father still is a musician.
Well, he's retired. He's retired
yeah.
now. Yeah. But
can you retire? Can you retire from?
Well, it's interesting because musicians, other than painters, I think musicians, they have also a technique. So it's like sports a little bit. And so, and he was a flutist. So after a few years, when you're around 50, 60, 70, your embouchure is the way you blow through the flute, something like that. That becomes more difficult. And he also had trouble with stress. So he at some point, which is a bit strange if you're a performing artist and you fear the stage, that at some point becomes difficult. Sure. So, and he was tired of all the politics also involved in trying to get the money and funding and stuff like that. So I think at some point he was just, I quit.
Okay.
So, so music and so the art was, I was immersed in art, which was a normal thing for me, but it was actually a bit strange, of course. I would go to these really wild, crazy, modern concerts, as well as going to a lot of exhibitions of modern artists and stuff like that. So it was very privileged, actually, but I never experienced it, because it was, for me, that was normal. So
what was weird and what was strange about those parties?
Well, the parties, the parties were also fun, but that was a bit different. But the music was, it was not your average harmonious music. It was really, really modern, like Mauricio Kagel and Ligeti and Eva Gubaidulina. These are really, really modernist composers. And my father was very much involved with these composers, and Reinbert de Leeuw and all these music artists. And it was, so I had to get used to that kind of music. But of course, it's also education. So it became part of my growing up, modern music, modern art. That was my
so you were so this is when you were 8, 9, so growing up with your parents. And so then you went, why did you choose the school that you went to? Because what did you study? Where did you go?
What
So I
happened?
did. I went to the art school in Rotterdam. So I remember I was doing. I
Was that
was.
something you like? That, of course, you go to an art school because there is no other option. Is it? Was there? Because
Yeah, I
you
was.
were you
Yeah.
rebellious at all, or is
No,
just like
I'm.
what?
Sometimes I regret that I was not rebellious but I had a brother. He was very rebellious. So I thought like, okay, well, he does all the rebellion thing,
How was he
and
rebellious? Well, what did he
he
do?
would do anything which was not allowed. So he would, he would sneak out of his bedroom, which was like 3 floors up, and he would jump into the lamppost and then slide down, stuff like that.
Like in the movie.
Like in the movie, he was, for me, he was a movie star. He did everything, he dared everything that I never dared. So I wouldn't even step on how do you call it, the side of the roof. I was a scary boy a little bit. I was not such a brave guy, and he would do anything. He was not scared, and if people told him jump, he would jump. He would do all the crazy stuff. I would come home very late and then, laugh at my parents. My parents were quite strict, but he would just laugh at them. So he did everything. So I didn't have to do that. He took away all the stuff from me.
If you describe your parents in a way, I can imagine that in my mind, they don't sound like strict because they go to wild parties and they're creatives and they're into this modern music and they're all that. But then they were very strict.
Yeah, but parents are also just parents. I mean, my mother was very much into biological food and all these things, and not too much TV, and I mean all the same things that we also do a little bit, but not as strict. But my mother, she was very strict on a lot of things.
So your brother was basically trying,
breaking out.
He was breaking out, and because he did all that, you didn't really have to. Maybe.
It was easy. I mean, he would become a punker. He had this huge, and I copied him. Of course, he was my older brother, so I wanted to do that. But then I would be very clean. I was a very clean punker. He was very dirty. I mean, he would smell. I was like, I want to be, I want to be looking like a rebel, but I wasn't really a rebel.
Yeah, you were a clean rebel. You were
a clean rebel,
the one person that actually washed. So
yes.
A bit sad. The clean punker. So your brother, is he part of sort of the way you developed? What is there?
So it's a very close relationship. I mean, we were also a bond because I remember my parents would be very, how do you call that? Intensive. They would be very intensive, and they would have a lot of fights together also, really fights. And, these biological breads from the 70s or the 80s, they were not the nice tasting breads. They were like bricks. And if you would eat them, you would eat one slice and you would have enough for 3 days or something like that. So they would throw these at each other also sometimes. And they would go through windows.
Bread fights.
So yes. But they were scary. I mean, I was a bit scared. So I remember my brother would always protect me. And we would be sitting on the stairs waiting until, things got more quiet. So they were very intense with each other. They loved each other, but they were also very intense, and that was, it was also. So we were banding together to keep safe.
Is your brother...
I mean, they wouldn't be dangerous. They wouldn't hit us, but it was very intense. I remember that.
Is your brother still like that?
Well, no, he's getting older, of course, but he's always choosing his own path. I mean, he was 19 until he finally got his graduated from high school. He would jump on his motorcycle and would drive to a girlfriend he made he actually met her in the US when we went on a trip in the US. He met her, a beautiful Italian girl, and he went to follow her. And he would drive on his motorcycle on his 19th to Rome. And he never really came back. So he was out.
He never came back.
He came back for holidays and stuff like that.
Okay.
Here. But he stayed in Italy, so he's become an Italian.
And he's still there.
He's still there. Yes, he lives in Venice.
Same girlfriend?
No, he wasted a few. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
A rebel.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so you went to art school.
Yeah, so it was strange. So I already, I remember, I think it was like age 12, and I decided to become a graphic designer. It's really
Why?
weird. I don't
Because
know.
of your mother? Well,
Probably. Yes, probably. Yeah,
I don't
because
think.
I like the idea of this this studio where you create stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was to me like, wow, that's a great space, because it's complicated to create communication, but it's also interesting to come up to a concept where you tell a story in this piece of paper. It felt interesting, and I was like, okay. I did Waldorf school, so I was, I had this idea, and the danger a little bit of the Waldorf school is they make you feel fantastic. They
What's
make
the
you
Waldorf
feel like,
school?
well, the Vrije School,
Mhm.
Waldorf school. I think it's a kind of a anthroposophical philosophy, and it's a great school because it has a strange philosophy. The danger is becomes a little bit like a sect. It's a bit different. But the good thing is that they make you, they really try to develop all your perspectives. And if you're a little bit creative, then you can really do anything you want there. And they also make you feel like you're the best in the world. So you come to art school, and then the first thing you know is, oh, God, I'm really terrible. I'm not very good at this. So I chose to go to art school.
But then you were prone to that kind of thinking anyway.
I mean,
I see you as a kid in your mother's studio saying, "I can't do it. I hate this." And then you go to Waldorf school, and they tell you, "You're awesome. You're wonderful."
Yeah.
And then you go to a real school. Sorry.
Yes.
And they'll say, "We have to tell you something, Maarten."
Yeah. Well, they didn't tell me, but I felt.
How did you know? How did you feel? But how did they make you? Did they make you feel? Because were you really, or was it just insecurity?
No, it was insecurity, of course. I mean, that's the great experience when you move from your very safe home space and you go out to study. I mean, the big jump is, of course, now you're on your own. You have to fix it, and you're confronted not so much with teachers. I mean, the funny thing was in art school, I mean, they would never really tell you stuff. They would just, you would put to work, but you were confronted with your peers, and the peers were much better than I thought I was. I mean, this is also about perception.
But if you look back, do you think, if you look, because sometimes you look back at your own work later, and then you think, well, it's actually not that bad, or you're still like, no, I was really
bad. It was really bad. It was really bad. It was because so you come in this position where you're trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do here? And that's the whole problem. I recognize this with students now, of course. It's the same thing. This is really when you come from, and this is maybe also the problem with education, the way we educated our children, is that they think they have to do the things the way they are supposed to do it. And that's, of course, totally not interesting. They have to, forget all that and forget about what's supposed to be. And that's, of course, that I had to learn there in art school, because there's no supposed to do. There's no supposed to. The best solution how to do it is just let go of yourself and try to come up with new ideas.
Was that were you stimulated in that respect? Did the school help you figure that out?
But no one can help you figure something. I mean, this is really something you have to do yourself.
Yeah, but the school can give you the environment to figure it out.
Yeah, that depends very much on the teacher. Of course, there were some teachers, and the best, I think, for me, the most effective teachers were the ones that really pushed you beyond your limits. So they really gave you so much tasks that you were over drowning in, an unreachable goal. So he would tell me, like, okay, tomorrow I want to see like 40 self-portraits. And then, of course, the first 10 you struggle, you try to make them pretty, and then after number 15 or 20 you forget about what is supposed to be. You just start doing because there's no time, and that's actually the moment where you discover that you cross the boundary.
And that's intentional.
That's intentional, and that's very efficient. I mean,
that takes courage. That takes courage, from a teacher.
Yeah.
To piss off your students.
Yeah.
And then have them discover the reason for it later. Yeah. Often years later, like, oh, by the way, that was really important. But at the moment, everybody's like,
I never told him.
No,
he was the best teacher I have ever had.
You never told him?
No, because at that moment I was just hating him.
Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing. Yeah. But that's really, and you immediately, as a student, you immediately recognize the teachers who try to please you, and they are no use to you. I mean, they don't help you because they should not be there to please you. They should be pushing you beyond your boundaries. That's what they're supposed to do. So that was a big lesson for me. Work hard.
Because because you're a teacher as well.
Yeah.
So how do you translate that experience into your own teaching? Is that?
Yeah, so I mean that principle of when it's possible. So the problem is now that unfortunately in a lot of school situations, actually, the assignments that you create are not always your own. I mean, they are supposed to be following so many regulations. It's totally regulated. And then the problem is that that regulation is never my regulation. So that's a bit more difficult so you have to create that space. But it depends a little bit on the school, of course, where you are. So.
Mm. Are you able to?
But I really bring that along. So trying to push people beyond their limits. So I'm now supervising some students trying to make their thesis, and they go crazy with my feedback because I keep pushing them. And some it works, and sometimes I have to figure out, that doesn't work for everyone. Of course, I mean you cannot. There's no mold, so you have to be empathic to the person in front of you.
Because I can imagine that for some, it actually it might block them and might make them so insecure about their abilities that might not even be able to. They won't survive, basically.
No, but I think that's so. So it's not about It's more subtle than just overloading people with tasks. I mean, it's not that simple. It's really. I mean, it is. I mean, that is part of it, but of course, the biggest element is that you don't let go. So you, as a role, your teacher, role as a teacher is to keep them close and learn what they need to push the boundary. But your goal is still to push the boundary, bring them, make them cross boundaries. That is your role, I think.
But don't let go.
But don't let go. No, because you have a responsibility.
Right. So, going back to your art school.
Yes.
So, are there things So you went through art school. I mean, you graduated.
Yeah.
So somehow you were good enough. Was there a moment that you started realizing, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had this very classical, process of, the first 2 years you're struggling, and then at some point you figure out a way to, hey, this is easy. Now I know what to do, or now I know what works, and then you become a little bit complacent, and then you go out because then you have to do an internship, and then you discover, oh no, I'm wrong. I still don't get it
again.
So you have to go through all these stages, and at some point, I discovered also that collaboration or working together. And I had a partner with whom I worked very closely, and she was such a total complementary to my skills, and she was just. My problem is sometimes I think too much. I want to really get the depth of what the meaning of things are, and she would just do. But that combination was great, because then I would be able to make sense of what we were actually doing. So the combination of just blindly creating stuff without a real clear plan, and then discovering, what is this actually about, and the sense making, that combination was fantastic. So working in a duo, which made it sometimes difficult for the school, for the art school, because they were like, how do we judge you two? Because who did what? And we don't know. And because this is also a problem with the complete individualistic style of art.
So hang on. So you say it wasn't you weren't supposed to do that as a duo. The school there wasn't part of it assignments, but you chose to work as a duo because you discovered that
was fantastic.
Really worked for both of you.
Yeah.
And then the school said, "What are you doing?" You're like, "You're two persons. You're not one."
Yeah. That was difficult for them, but it depended a little bit. Well, we didn't care, so they had to cope. we thought, like, we really like the way we are progressing in this way. So this is our path, and you just adjust, and you just write something down, and you figure out who did what, and I don't care. We just go on. So that worked very well for us, and they probably had some trouble in putting it in the right boxes in the school regulations and the administration, but we didn't really care much about that. So it was an amazing time.
Sounds like it.
Yes.
Being able to just not to care about what the people who are judging you in the end actually think.
Yeah, well, that's also the moment where when you're in that state, that actually you will be successful, because this is where the biggest problem, I think, and maybe that's even worse now, but and that's in any study probably, but we are so much focused on our image and how are we perceived, and maybe that's even worse now. We're so very conscious of ourselves that but the moment when you forget that, when you're what they call in flow, or however you want to call it, but you're in a state where you don't care. This is the moment where you are on the top of your creativity.
Then what happened?
And then what happened? Yeah, well, I graduated. Yeah, and
what happened?
We started to as a duo. As a duo, we graduated as a duo, and we thought, okay, let's. This is Miek Walda, by the way. I think it's important to mention her. And so we had this idea. Okay, we're ready. So let's start a studio and sit by the phone, and let's wait until they call us. And no one called. That was really strange. So let's pick up the phone again. Oh no, still no one. No, so that was interesting. But we would just do very silly small assignments and stuff, and create stuff. And then we ended up, because there was I did an internship in a studio in Amsterdam, and one of the guys, Bob van Dijk, great designer, he said, okay, you have to come to Studio Dunbar in The Hague, design studio, and join us. And I said, well, we're with two, so can we come? And he said, okay. So we had this project for a museum, and then we never left there, or never. Well, I stayed there for 7 years. Miek left
Studio Dunbar.
Dunbar, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I stayed there for 7 years, and then I decided, I can do this much better. I'll do this myself.
You decided?
Yes. When at the moment, so my girlfriend Dolly was pregnant, and I thought that's a great moment to start your own agency. So we started, but it took me quite a while, because there were a few people that I wanted to bring along, because I didn't want to go alone. So
why not?
Because I really had much fun with some of the people there, and I thought, like, okay, let's do this together, because we need a band. So we created the band, which was Ping Pong Design. This is actually where that started. Mm-hmm.
So I am interested in the with this sort of the side note of, this is where your girlfriend was pregnant.
Yes.
Because obviously that is not the right time to start.
Well, everybody tells you, don't, you have a stable income. Now you have a house. We bought a house. Wow. It was all very, very privileged, very nice, very good. And then start your own company was not very logical, even in, I think, 2000, summer 2000, economy was not crazy. I mean, it was kind of not very well. It was okay, but it was not perfect. So it was not the most logical thing to do, but it felt like, okay, now. And I already had been waiting because I wanted to bring Barry along, which is the craziest creative mind I know. And he had to come, but he was not ready yet. So I think I waited a year or something. And by talking constantly, come on, let's go, come on. He finally said, okay, let's go. So that's how that happened.
Right. And so I can imagine that were these stressful times, or was it actually?
It was
this
great.
Like great times? Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we had not much to eat, or we had not much income, but we had to invent. We had a problem because we had this contract signed with the agency that we were not allowed to go in the same market, or so that was all complicated. And I remember one of the partners of the studio, he would go call all the clients and say, "Hey, you're not allowed to work with them. Remember, we have a contract."
Because Studio Dunbar. They
was afraid that we would steal their clients.
Yes.
And they were right, because we would otherwise probably have done that. But
was there a big fight? So, was it a big fight? I mean, were they
no, it was not a big fight. Of course, I mean, I can imagine that if you have a studio with 28 people, and then 5 people say, "Hey, let's do this ourselves." That can be a little bit annoying. So they were probably not that happy with that, which I can understand. But of course, we didn't care much about that. So but we had great fun. So we had to invent ourselves. And remember, we wanted to start up, and we needed, of course, to get attention a little bit. And there was this art exhibition in Barcelona. We thought, hey, let's go to Barcelona. We want to go there. But then to get in there, we had to have a portfolio to present our work. So we thought, like, well, we don't have a portfolio because we cannot show anything that we've done in the past, because we're not allowed to show that. So we invented the portfolio, and we had to also tell them that we had already had some exhibitions. So we created a fake exhibition. So we invented the whole idea that we had a fantastic exhibition at Gallery Bunk, and Jan Bunk was one of the partners. So we created the virtual fake exhibition, and we made pictures, or we Photoshop pictures of an opening with the big band, and it was all fake. And we sent that in.
Hang on.
I'm trying to make it a little bit complicated. Sorry.
Rewinding.
Yes.
Wait. So
yes.
When did you decide to? No, I know when, but why and how? And how did that go about? So you said, let's just go and lie to these people, and we'll get away with it. That's fine.
Well, we didn't know if we would get away with it, but we thought it was just great fun to invent the idea that we had done an exhibition in somewhere, a fake gallery named Bunk, and that we had this fantastic party. And it was also like, it would be nice if this would have happened. And let's just make that, because we had nothing to do. We were waiting. We had not much clients. So we thought, like, let's just do this as a project and see how far we get.
Amazing.
And we got pretty far. So we were invited, and so then we had to produce all the stuff, because we had only just photoshopped it and then ship it over to Barcelona, and then get invited to the opening, of course.
And you got invited.
Yes. And we got invited, and we had a great party, and we drank all the gin, I think. And
did they ever? I mean, what happened?
Well, they had great fun, because we told them, of course, when we arrived. They said, "Yeah," and they were really laughing. They were really happy. They thought it was great. So they
were not like, what?
They were like, that's great.
People.
Well done. I think maybe they were just polite. I'm not sure.
I don't know, but for any, anyone starting a design career or a design agency, and this is some great advice. Take this advice. Fake it until you make it.
Yes, it works.
Yeah,
it's great.
But is there a truth? I mean, is there a deeper truth to that?
It's not very deep, but it's true. No, just create the. So I think, and this is of course something that I have to remember myself. Also, I mean, it's not like, okay, you've done this once, so now you're cured. Now the rest of your life you'll be successful. You have to do this all the time.
Well, I'm saying this because because one of the biggest problems for anyone starting out is that you haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
In your case, it was sort of like you couldn't show what you've done. So it's even worse because you've done it, but you can tell because you did do the work.
Yeah.
But you can't show it. Either you haven't done it because you didn't have the opportunity, but people will ask you, can I show me your work?
Yeah.
So that attitude, I think, is important, right? The attitude of go and create it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where did that sort of was your partner Barry, because you introduced him?
Of course, he was very important in pushing us to not care about it. I mean, it was a bit exciting, a bit scary, but we were like, okay, we have nothing to lose, so why wouldn't we do this? And it was great fun.
Okay, so you went to Barcelona. How is that? Was that part of sort of the the success that was? I mean, I know. So Ping Pong, it's been a very successful company. Mm-hmm. Was that the start of the success story, or?
Well, it was the start of the culture of us, of the four of us. So we were with four partners, and it was the start of trying to understand what are we trying to do, and what do we want to do. And it was, of course, part of it was create new realities, and not only to make fun, but also to create new realities also for our clients and customers. So, and of course we would not copy that literally, but we were very curious to see if we work for a Rabobank or any other corporate client, we always would try to see what kind of reality, and even if it's not just not there, but what kind of reality would fit with this kind of team or this kind of organization. What reality should they be creating? And we would try to design that. And of course, the problem with that is and that is also what at some point I wanted to get out of the whole idea of advertising or commercial communication, because you're creating promises. And actually, no one cares, because that's there. So there was a big disconnect between that reality creating that we honestly believed that was a good reality that would really fit them, but it was completely disconnected, of course, because we were creating that reality. They were not creating it; we were creating it for them. So it was just a big promise, and they really liked it because it had good, it helped their reputation and image, all these kind of things. But there was a complete disconnect between what was happening in that organization and that reality that we painted for them. There was nothing there. And also the creation process, it was silly. I mean, we had a great time creating those realities. I remember we made alternative realities for the Rabobank, really interesting. It's a Dutch cooperative bank. And we really took the idea of cooperative bank and ran with it. And we created these, scenarios that could have been reality for them. But, they said, oh, great, thank you very much. Really interesting. Thank you. We put it in this drawer. And then we never talk about it. And we're like, what are we doing wrong here? And this is also where the moment came where I thought I want to make an impact. And of course, it's great to paint realities, but if it's just fake, or if it's just superficial, but it doesn't make any impact, it doesn't change any realities, then it's useless.
So why did you want to make an impact? Where does that come from? I mean, you because it sounds like that's it. That's the way it goes. That's how a lot of agencies will work that way.
Yeah.
But you said it's not enough.
No, it's not enough in the sense that that I really believe that we found something in creating those scenarios that we thought like, but this is really something that is worthwhile. The whole sense-making process of getting there that we were doing in our team. It was a waste to do that in our team and keep the doors closed. We were like, but this is a fantastic process. Why are we doing this with the doors closed? So we would start inviting more and more clients in that process, which sometimes worked. But we also discovered that, it's not about us creating that reality. What if we would be in a situation where we could help these teams or these groups of people inventing those scenarios and designing those scenarios? Because the thing is that as soon as you try to become and paint this new reality or future possibilities, you will move in that direction. But if someone else is doing that for you, you will never be able to move in that direction because you're not part of the discovery process. But it's not answering your question, of course. Why?
Oh yeah, why you?
Yeah, why me? Yeah. Well, this is also a little bit my probably my teacher or my supporter or facilitator heart. I'm much more curious, and this has also been my role in ping pong design, where I was like, it's not so much like that I want to be this artist creating this fantastic new reality. I want to enable that enabling that situation where you're together with a group of people, whoever they are, and build on each other's ideas and in this and get in this situation, in this flow where you forget everything, where there's no limitations and of course you have to sometimes check reality, but there's also this energy and excitement that when you are in that space you can do fantastic things. And
I get that, but there are a lot of people who would not and were not considering that. And when are we talking? What year is this? Where is this the?
This was like 2010, something like that. So we were already on our way as a studio, like 10 years, something like that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and at that time, there were plenty of people who were not thinking that way. So what do you think made you feel that way, or have that urge, or have that need to do things differently? Is there something? I mean, I do hear in some of your stories that you're more like your brother than you might think you are. In a different way.
Yeah.
But I think your brother would be very proud of you for inventing a show and using that to go to Barcelona. But is there something? Is there some connection? Is there some need to prove yourself differently? Is there a need to? Is it part of it because you are, you're a thinker and you kind of want to kind of understand how things work? Is that it? Because if you don't,
So but of course that's one part of it. The other part is then making an impact. I mean that surely that is my interest, but it's not about image. It's not about that I want to be, this is my idea and I created this new insight. That impact is really related to bringing a group of people together, different minds, different ideas, different ways of thinking, and then finding a way to make that work, to make that engine kick off and go moving and start creating.
Is the little boy still there? the one that says to his friends, "Get out! You're ruining everything. Just let me." Is that still there?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
totally gone?
That is there. Yeah, and that. So there.
How
are
does that
really,
manifest itself if that boy is still there?
Then I need to shut the door or go out or go somewhere and try to think through. I need some time sometimes to hit the brake or have some how do you call that? Have a pause to how do you call that? That it needs incubation, and I need incubation. So sometimes I need some moment to because you can get bogged down in the day-to-day operations or the day-to-day patterns, and then and then it's not easy to incubate. So you need downtime,
because
I need downtime
because you still want to understand how things work. You still want to kind of take things apart and see how it works. I know. So it's part of your interest in which you call complexity. Mm-hmm. Is that sort of something that you can, if you look back at your career, your life, are there things that you say, there's a clear pattern, or can you?
Well, there are a few patterns that I remember. I would also feel the responsibility to keep things together. So I had a role in my family, mm-hmm. especially with my parents throwing bread through the windows.
Right.
To at some point I became less scared, and I thought like, okay, but I can fix this. I had this really strange idea that I could fix anything. So
the fights that your brother had with your parents, that in turn kind of created
not so much with them, but between them.
But so you described there was a sort of a tension. There
were quite some tensions. My parents had this kind of love-hate relationship, so very intense. But at some point that broke down. It became more difficult. My mother went ill, so she had a disease, multiple sclerosis, which is a kind of progressive disease, and she lost it. She became even quite old for that disease. She became she lived until 65. But in the meanwhile, the relation, I mean, that changes. Huh? So my father became like a nurse, but a love relationship or a nursing relationship, that's completely different, and that didn't really work. My mother was very depressed and also the disease changes also your brain a little bit. So she became very bitter and difficult, and my father had some affairs and stuff like that, and then he got also a child with another woman, so it was really complex. And I thought I could organize that. I had this really naive idea that I had graduated and I had written my thesis, so I thought, like, with my brain I can fix everything. So I had this idea. This was no one asked me to do it. I just did that. So I thought I needed to fix that or to organize it in such a way that it was pleasant for everybody. I want to build harmony. That is also that is a pattern. So and maybe professionally productive harmony, but harmony is really something that I thrive. I remember as a small boy, I would join parties and I would never speak because I knew that I would speak up. Then my mother would realize that, are you still up? Are you still in the room? Please go to your room. But I would really enjoy being silently sitting on a table like a fly on the wall during all these crazy parties and follow the discussions and make sure that everybody had something to drink, that everybody would stay. I would want sometimes these parties to last forever because I really enjoyed being there without being there. So harmony is really something that I think drives me in a way. I'm not sure if it should be called harmony, but it's really where that energy is being on the right level.
How did you? How did that kind of manifest itself when you were leading Ping Pong Design, your design studio?
Well, that didn't always work out, of course. I wasn't. I would also create problems, of course, and be very not the easiest boss. I think sometimes because yes, what you say about this frustrating boy, get up, don't ruin this. So I would have the same problems with it as well. So I was protective as well as trying to create harmony, but yeah, but the problem sometimes with an agency or a studio is also struggling with both responsibility and you cannot hide if you're because the problem also that's also I think a problem sometimes with leadership where you are the founder then and you have a big mouth then people start trying to figure out what you want them to do. So you get in that same pitfall. And then I don't know always what's the best solution. So then I would just start being very directive, which of course didn't help. So that's also where the whole idea of servant leadership. I had no conceptions of what that means, or how do you enable others if they're just waiting for you to tell them what to do. And I created a situation where that sometimes became difficult.
So you've experienced leadership, being led by others in a more sort of a hierarchy situation, but you've also you are a leader and you've been a manager and you've been a leader. So you've had all these experience of what's also your own kind of limitations, other people's limitations.
Yeah.
Where are you now? When you think about leadership, where are you? What is your think? What is the latest thinking on this topic?
Yeah. So,
in your mind?
So I think that, so I really believe in the importance of empowering. So finding ways to empower people to manage their way forward. So I had to create a situation where they don't have to think so much about. And this is also something that I have to teach myself. So the only way to get forward is, of course, start doing things. And this is something we discussed a lot with you are what you do is so what you are actually doing is actually what brings you along. So I think there are a few things important. One is that we have a kind of a difficult, we have a challenge in overcoming the stereotype of leadership. And this is, of course, what leadership means. And actually, so it's not about how you explain it. It's really about the kind of the mean or the baseline of leadership is the stereotype of leadership. And that determines how people talk about it and also how they behave beyond it. And of course, when you think more deeply about it, then, there are all kinds of, interesting thoughts about it. But the heuristic, the kind of the standard reflexive mind that kind of interprets leadership has a big impact on how we behave on this. And this is not only effective to the followers, so the people that have to be led or they think they have to be led, but also to the people who think they are leaders. And I think that is such I really believe in the importance of how the brain works, because if we don't understand how the brain works, we cannot change much in our, at least we should be conscious about it. And I think we should first become more conscious of the stereotypes of leadership. Because if we don't, then we will have very bad leadership and very bad followership for the next coming 200 years. So I think that is a very important element that needs to be discussed. And I think just by talking about it already, that becomes, then we switch a little bit to our bit more conscious brain. But the heuristic is still there, and the heuristic is very determining bad leaders and bad followers. So that, I think, is one element.
So how do we, talking about it is one way, obviously, creating language.
Yes.
I think that's really important. But how do we What is your idea of what's next? What's coming? I mean, is it something we do, or is it a natural evolution? Where are we going with leadership and followership?
Yeah, so I think that starts, of course, with first of all starting understanding better about followership, what that means, and what people need, and what actually helps people to feel supported in what they do, because that's the whole goal of leadership. You want to create a situation in which people are flourishing, and so if we understand how that works, then actually maybe we can abolish the whole idea of leadership as a whole, or figure out other ways to create, what is the best way to create that situation where people can flourish. So overcoming the heuristics or creating new heuristics, that's also fine. This is, how the brain works. So when we abolish one heuristic, we'll replace it with another one. That's also fine. But then, of course, understanding, what do people need to create this flow or create this flourishing and productivity, however you want to call it, but create a situation where people can thrive. And of course, one element of that is more diversity. So part of the stereotype is, of course, that we have a stereotype of what leaders should be, and they are probably white and male and old. And so that's also a stereotype that really, but the problem is, as long as we accept or acknowledge those stereotypes, we can never move forward, because they will stand in the way of moving forward. And it's not really about breaking them down, but I think it really is about putting new examples next to it, alternatives or new better solutions.
But is it an evolution? Is it something that we need to do? Does it depend on us taking action, or do you think it is happening? Do we see it happen, and is it a natural evolution? And is it inescapable, or is it somewhere in between?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I think as long and so you will probably need to disrupt this in order to overcome that heuristic, or to
but do you see changes happening at the moment? Are there things that are changing? Are there things moving in that direction, or is it static?
Well, I hope to. Let's try to look at this as positive as possible. And of course, there are signs of the crazy thing is, we're in a situation. I think that is also a sign of change. So we're in a situation where there are a lot of very toxic leaders, and they are quite dominant at the moment. But at the same time, we are really, challenging that. So I think maybe part of the change is that we get this really big polarization between, the ultimate one way of looking at things and the other way of looking at things. So the more it's stretched apart or disrupted, or the more it's in crisis, that brings a lot of opportunity to change for the good.
So we need leaders who can bring harmony.
Yes, but it sounds a bit too nice.
I'm linking it to your to again the little boy.
Yeah, but harmony is not a goal in itself. So harmony is not a goal in itself. It's just a means to get to a situation. And I mean, so harmony is when the situation is in a good spot. Then you need to create the harmony or maintain the harmony in order to make it continue. But to get there, you cannot change anything with harmony. I mean, you need this harmony. And so I really like the idea. This is something that is recently much more in my head. I don't know. I'm thinking a lot about these ideas of paradoxes. And I think you need the two. We should stop thinking about this is good and that is bad. We should consider more the extremes of things and constantly be aware of, what is the the end point on this side and what's the end point on the other side. So really think of paradoxes, because we have to navigate those. And as long as we have to think of 2 points, we have to constantly position ourselves where on the continuous line between the two do we have to put ourselves. And it challenges us to think and to change course constantly. As soon as we start forgetting it or think, okay, it's only about this, we get dogmatism, and dogmatism doesn't really lead to the right way. So I think harmony is in constantly being aware of where are you between the line, on that line, on that continuous.
That brings back an image from this conversation, in the start of the conversation, where you were talking about your father being a musician and the modern music. Do you talk about your father about the disharmony? And because in that, the composers that you mentioned were really dealing with harmony and disharmony, right?
Yes, very much. Yeah. They were, of course. I mean, that also had to do with, I think, the romanticism of the early 1900s, where they had to disrupt, had a sort of like the 12-tone chromatic music. I mean, I'm not a musician, so I don't really know how to call it, but so they really had to disrupt that whole idea of the classical music, of being nice and being harmonious. But of course, that doesn't mean that, classical harmonious music is bad and modern music is good. And that idea, that is really, I think, a silly idea of the past, where we think like it's either this or it's either that.
Right.
And we should really think much more. And it's not very nice. To be radical is nice to be, only on the left or only on the right. I think it's important to constantly think about these things, because the problem is, as soon as we get stuck in one side, we are not able to see the other, good things of the other part. So we have to constantly navigate that.
Right. So the future leader, or the leader that we need, is the one able to navigate both of the ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, making sense of how to deal with these paradoxes, and actually acknowledging the fact that there are paradoxes, that there's no one way or there's no one simple. Right. So I think that
like we need bad to have good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in a way, yes. You need to consider, what are the other perspectives, and I think so. The idea of diversity is that we don't say, okay, all white old guys are bad. That's no point in that. We only need women, or we only need. It's silly. We have to be considerate. What are the elements, the good elements of some of the older leadership styles that we can still use. I remember that teacher who really pushed me. He was like a dictator. But he did some things good. He did a lot of things bad, but he did some things very good. And I picked that out. And I think that being conscious of those perspectives, I think, is a really important role that you have to play.
So, last question, and we get to the end of the interview. No, I really enjoy the conversation. What's next for you? What's in your agenda? What's next? What's the
my agenda is empty and full, so it's a little bit of paradox. So I have to challenge myself to pivot again. I do this quite often, so I have to pivot again, which I'm really looking forward to. I have to grab my strength also a little bit. I have to break the harmony also a little bit. And I always liked the idea of the Baron from Munchausen, pushing yourself up from your bootstraps. So the whole that crazy idea, which is impossible, but it's still possible. It's when you move in the direction you want to go, then you will go there. But you have to just set your goal and set a point in time where you want to go, and you will go there. And then try to forget thinking too much.
Sounds like solid advice.
Yes.
So thank you very much for this interview. And
thank you, Arne. I really enjoyed it. Nice
me too.
Conversation.
Thank you. And Well, I'm looking forward to continue this conversation, maybe over a beer, or because
Beer's always good.
I like to know more about that little boy who said, "Get out of my room! You're ruining everything."
Exactly.
We'll talk about that later, my friend.
Good.
All right.
All right. Thank you.